All right, thanks so much for joining us again for our Census GeoForum. This is the last section of our sessions today, talking about how to access census data. We're joined by a number of great presenters. We're going to start off with Noemi Mendez. Noemi is a data dissemination specialist where she develops and delivers workshops and webinars on census data and geography. Thanks so much for joining us, Noemi.
Hello, everyone. My name again is Noemi Mendez. I'm with the Center for Enterprise Dissemination, Dissemination Outreach Branch at the U.S. Census Bureau. And I'm going to talk in the next 45 minutes a little bit about finding complex geographies on data.census.gov. So here's my outline, okay? I'm going to talk about geographic entities versus summary levels and what's the difference between the two. We're going to look at using part of the data.census.gov known as within other geographies, looking for geographic components, and then I'm going to end with some tips and tricks and resources. So let's get going. Okay. So I just kind of want to start by giving a general data availability of what's available on data.census.gov. I know it's a big chart, but we've also included the URL, so you can click on that. So we have, a bigger kind of data sets of the decennial census from 2000 to present, the American Community Survey, or the ACS, from 2010 to present, and then our econs, census and selected surveys from 2012 to present. Okay, so I'm going to start off with talking about geographic entities versus summary levels. Okay, so a little bit about geographic entities versus summary levels. So you'll see them here on the left-hand side under our geographies section. So you'll see we have some of the most kind of frequently accessed geographies here, okay? But I kind of want to concentrate on when you go to all geographies and you want to go ahead and you want to select a geographic entity. So that means you would get the areas and boundaries that are used for collecting data, which are geographies. And then our summary levels is a little bit different because they're 3-digit codes that designate different geographic levels. And they're not the same thing as FIPS codes, which are those federal FIPS codes. I just blanked out, sorry. But they're not the same as the processing system codes, okay? And then some are only available for specific censuses and surveys. And I think that's an important thing to realize, okay? So I just have a screenshot. When you're on data.census.gov and you've selected your geography, this is where you find the geographic entities section and then the summary level section. So when you click on geographic entities, you'll see all of the geographies in alphabetical order, okay? Starting with 5-digit zip code all the way down to the end. So that's one way to select your geographies. When you're using summary levels, which is what I'm going to also show this afternoon, you'll see it goes kind of like from the larger entity from the United States down to smaller levels. So you can get pretty finite data for these. So for instance, if you wanted to do county subdivision, you would use summary level 60, which you'll go from the state to the county to the subdivision. So you're kind of drilling down there using that level. And then as far as the geographic entities, when you're using this selection, you're using the geographies, and these are in alphabetical order. So for instance, if I wanted to get data on the American Indian, Alaska Native Hawaiian homeland, I can go ahead and select that geography right there. With the summary levels, again, these are, I guess you'll see these are in numerical order, but you see there's a lot more different things that you can choose here. So you can go, use the kind of overreaching, the big umbrella of all of the AIAN, Alaska Native Hawaiian homelands. But then you can say, well, maybe I'm interested in a tribal subdivision remainder, or maybe I'm interested in getting tribal census tracts. This is what's really good about using the summary levels here. Okay, so again, summary levels are the primary summary level for the entire let's say American Indian areas, Alaska Native areas, and Hawaiian homelands, okay? So you'll see kind of like the big sort of overreaching umbrella, but you can drill down really finite, and you'll see that the summary levels go from 251 to 294, and these are smaller portions of those areas. So you can see, like I said, you can drill down, to tribal tracts, you can go down to remainders, anything that you particularly would like, or that you wouldn't be able if you were just using the regular, just diving into data.census.gov you would kind of drill down this way. So here's an example. I'm going to talk about this a little bit, and then I'm going to do the example on data.census.gov. So here's a question. Maybe you're interested in how much of the population of Kansas City, Missouri falls within each of these counties. And that that does happen where a city will go over numerous counties, and you want to find, let's say, the portions of those areas. So how do we do that? So I'm going to go ahead. This is data.census.gov. Yeah, if you haven't been on here in a while, we've done a little bit of a facelift. So it's a little bit different. We now have an explore filters area that you can use, and we still have our search by address. But I'm going to go ahead and just go to explore filters. Okay. So right here, I'm going to go to, let's see, I'm going to go to all geographies. So right now, again, I want to select summary level 155, the county within a place. So I'm going to go ahead and switch on summary levels. The one I want to use is summary level 155. Okay, so you see it's state, place, county. So that's how it drills down. Okay, we're going to select that one. And then for my state, we're going to look at Missouri. You can scroll down, or you can use the search bar here to type in. It'll give it the geographies that start with that letter. So here's my state. And then my place. So I'm looking for Kansas City, Missouri. Okay, right here. So I'm going to click that. And then we do want all 4 parts of these because we want to see where they're located on the map. And again, I want to make sure everything is here. I'm just going to give it a second to catch up a little bit. So I'm going to use a table called B01001, and that's sex by age. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit the little spyglass here. And if you're new to data.census.gov, there's a few different ways to get to the table. But once again, make sure your filters have everything that you need. You can click on the link here, the hyperlink. You can click on tables, or you can click here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on the link here. So now it's showing us sex by age for males and females, and it gives you the different age brackets. Okay. And here are the parts right here. So you have Cass County part, Kansas City, Missouri, Clay, Jackson, and I'm just going to scroll over a little bit. And then you can see Platte. So let's go to the map. Okay, here's our geographies. So let's go ahead and let's zoom in. And I'm going to use the identify button here. So here is our first Platte County. Okay. Clay County, Jackson, and then you have to zoom in very, very small here. This one right here. And that's Cass County. Okay, so now we found all of the portions of Kansas City that fell within all of the counties. And I've also included in the slide deck the steps that you can take to do this, so you can replicate them. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about within other geographies. Okay, so within other geographies allows you to access additional collections of geographies. So for instance here, if you click on census tract and you open up within other geographies, you can see some of the other geographies that you can select. If you want to do a place, congressional district, state legislative district, and it tells you how many more are available. And then if you wanted to do zip code tabulation area, you can see you can get the per county, place, estimates, and then zip code tabulation area. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, again, within those other geographies. So we have neatly nested, which are all 5-digit zip code tabulation areas in the US, all counties within South Dakota, and then all blocks within Fond du Lac County, Wisconsin. So neatly nested means that they don't cross boundaries, that they sit within the bigger geography. They're not crossing anything. And then we have what we call that are not neatly nested. These are accessed via the within other geographies portion. So let's say you wanted to get all 5-digit zip code tabulation areas fully, partially within Iowa, or all places that are fully, partially within Madison County, Alabama. And then finally, all metropolitan, micropolitan statistical areas fully, partially within Ohio. Okay, just some tips to determine those full or partial areas. So for instance, we have full areas. They tend to have short, clean labels, all the fully, partially language, and we have that in quotes, okay? So for instance, for this level 250, the American Indian area, Alaska Native area, Hawaiian homelands, you can see we have choices of, for example, all American Indian areas, Alaska Native areas, Hawaiian homelands that are fully or partially within Arizona. And that's the big key right there, is that the words fully, partially within. So some may fall within Arizona's boundaries and some may partially fall within Arizona boundaries. We also have the Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust land in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Then we have partial areas, often contain longer labels or the word part. For instance, this 260, American Indian, Alaska Native, Hawaiian homeland state, and then Arizona part, Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust land, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. So this is the geography here that we were looking at. And you can see here, it's and when you're using the fully partially, you can see that the geography falls across multiple geographies. But if you just want the part of a geography, for instance, you can just select that individual part. Okay, so let me see. I'm going to go ahead and do one example here. Let's do that fully partial one. So explore filters. I'm going to go to all geographies. And you'll see we have under geographic entities, we have a few choices for the American Indian, Alaska Natives. So you can go ahead and do trust land, the subdivision remainder, the reservation or the statistical areas only, or the big sort of umbrella again of American Indian, Alaska Native, Hawaiian homelands. So I'm going to select that. And then you can drill down further if you want to get an individual reservation or area, or you can select multiple ones and they're in alphabetical order. I want to select all of them because I want to show you a map of all of the geographies here. Okay. Let's see if we can go straight to the map. Okay. So I'm just going to just kind of like drill a little bit here so you can kind of see the different types of geographies that we have here. So we have Oneida Indian Nation. Down here we have the state designated tribal statistical areas. Here in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma tribal statistical areas. Here is the one we were just talking about earlier. So if I identify them, okay, the Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust lands. And you can zoom in and see the individual parts of these geographies if they're there, okay, and tells you the states in New Mexico, while in this one here, it was in Arizona. Then you have Pueblos and some other geographies here. I'm going to zoom up here and show the Alaska Native statistical areas. Okay, the Invasas, and then finally the Hawaiian homelands. Okay. Okay, let's talk about within other geographies. Okay. So Here's an example that I'd like to do to show you how to get zip codes that are partially within Genesee County. This is in New York, so I've included the steps here as well. Let's go ahead and do that example. I'm going to go back to our Explore filters. And this time we're going to select our zip code tabulation areas. If you're not familiar with zip code tabulation areas, these are approximate representations of zip codes, which is different. We do have 5-digit zip codes, but I will say that's used for economic or business data. If you're going to do demographic data, you definitely want to choose the zip code tabulation area. So there's another tip or trick there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and select our state. I would like New York. Okay. So I want to go ahead and this is what I'm going to use to within other geography. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to select my county. So I want all the zip codes within a county and I want Genesee County. Okay, Genesee County, New York. And then here, notice it says all 5-digit zip code tabulations area fully, partially within Genesee County, New York. And that's exactly what I want to see. Okay, so let's go to our map. Let me zoom out a little bit. So right now, these are the zip codes that are fully or partially within Genesee County. I'm going to use our boundaries here, and I'm going to add some counties. So you can see now the portions that are both within Genesee County, and let's say Niagara County or Orleans, Monroe, Wyoming, and then Livingston. Okay. Okay. Let's move on to geographic components. Okay, so geographic component is a subset of a given type of geographic entity that's based on a certain geographic or population characteristics. These are also alternatives for tabulating data. So in data.census.gov, there's over 100 geographic components that are available in the United States and states. I'm going to start off with urban-rural. So Census Bureau's urban areas represent densely developed territory and encompass residential, commercial, and other non-residential urban land uses. So the Census Bureau delineates or draws urban areas after each decennial census by applying specified criteria to decennial census and other data. Rural encompasses all the population, housing, and territory not included in the urban area. We call that the balance. So to learn more about urban rural, I've included the link to the geography section in our website. So here's a map just showing Massachusetts, showing the urban areas, which are these in this kind of blue lavender-ish color. And then in the balance is the rural area. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's map some urban rurals. I'm just going to go ahead and map Massachusetts again. Actually, I'm going to use Pennsylvania. So let's go back here. We're going to click on state. Now this is where we're going to select the show geographic components. So now I'm going to go ahead and put in the state that I want. I'm going to type in Pennsylvania. So here, so this is the kind of the bigger urban areas. So you can see you can drill down into urban areas and urbanized areas, urban clusters. There's a lot of different ones here. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to do the Pennsylvania urban. And I also want to select the Pennsylvania rural because I want to get data for these geographies. Now for my table, again, I'm going to use B01001. Okay, this is the sex by age table again. So let's go ahead and look at the table here, how it's broken down. Okay, Pennsylvania urban, Pennsylvania rural here. Let's go to our map. Oh, I don't think it's working, I'm sorry. But we could always add our boundaries if we wanted to look at them. But this, if you do it this way, you're not going to get any data. You're just going to get the geography. So let's see if I can quickly find it for us. There we go. Okay. So this is showing the urban areas here in red. And again, I've added those instructions here on how to go ahead and do that. Okay. So I'm going to move on to our tips and tricks. So some things to keep in mind when you're working with census geographies. So some geographies can be redefined or redrawn with each decennial census, such as census designated places or CDPs, tracts, block groups and blocks. Names are reused across the country, sometimes even within the same state or same county. And then always confirm that the geographies that you're using cover what you expect they should cover. Okay, so for my first tips and trick is economic places. So the economic census produces data for many levels of geography. Economic places are specifically created for tabulating data from the economic census and surveys. They highlight areas with concentrated economic activity. Economic places also cover the island areas, including counties in American Samoa and towns in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So economic places include census designated places, incorporated places, minor civil divisions or MCDs, counties, and the balance of counties. And again, here's for more information on that geography. And here are the steps here. So all geographies, economic place, Ohio, and then all economic places in Ohio. So let's go ahead and do the example. Again, explore filters. Excuse me. All geographies. I'm going to look for those economic places. Okay, they're right here. Select your state. We're going to go back to Ohio. It's a nice compact state. You can see the geography pretty easily. And then I want all economic places within Ohio. Go to our map. And you can see here, when you're looking at economic tables, you can see they have a different naming convention than you would look at regular, demographic data. So here we go. Let's zoom in. Sometimes the places do coincide with what we would say a regular place would be, but not always. So let's go ahead and use the identify button. Okay. So for instance, this is telling us there's an economic place for the balance of Carroll County, Ohio. And then if you zoom in smaller, okay, and then there are some economic places for cities. Okay, let's talk about state legislative districts. So state legislative districts, or SLDs, are the specific areas within a state that elect representatives to the state legislature. They include both the upper chamber, which is usually the Senate, and the lower chamber, usually the House or the Assembly. So Nebraska is an exception. It has a unicameral legislature, which is represented as an upper chamber entity. District of Columbia is also considered to have a single council, which is represented as an upper chamber entity. So the Census Bureau is responsible for collecting and maintaining data on state legislative districts. Plan updates are collected every 2 years, and typically New products are generated only for those state legislative districts that have changes. So here's one example here, looking at the lower chamber in Massachusetts. So here are the steps: all geographies, state legislative district, lower chamber, Massachusetts, all state legislative districts within Massachusetts. And it's very similar for the upper chamber. So again, all geos, state legislative districts, upper chamber, Massachusetts, all state legislative districts in upper Massachusetts. Let's go ahead and do one of these. Okay, so we have explore filters. Again, if I'm not seeing the geography that I would like to get data or map for here, go to all geographies, and then we're going to hit S to get us down to the S ones. And we want state legislative districts. Let's do the upper chamber. Again, Massachusetts. Again, you can select individual ones, but I want to look at all state legislative districts, the upper chamber within Massachusetts. You can look and see what tables are available. So there's the Decennial Census and American Community Survey data. Here's the breakdowns with the information from the 2020 census. Let's go to our map. Okay. So this is showing us the number by state legislative districts for that table P1. The darker areas have more of a concentration, and then the lighter areas have less. Okay. And it's very similar for the lower level. Okay, voting districts. So a voting district, or a VTD, is a generic term adopted by the Census Bureau to include the wide variety of those small polling areas, such as election districts, precincts, or wards, the state and local governments create for the purpose of administering elections. It's the smallest unit of election administration, essentially defining who goes to a particular polling place to cast their ballot. The size and scope of voting districts can vary greatly, and they're only available with the specific decennial census redistricting data, or it's called the Public Law 94-171. Okay, so I'm going to use another very small state, one of my favorite states, Delaware. We're going to go to all geographies, voting district, state, and then all voting districts in Delaware. I will say that this will take a little bit of time to render because of the small level of geography. That's why I also selected a small state. Okay, back to all geographies. Let's go to voting districts. Right here. I want it by state. And I would like Delaware. And I want to do, let's say, all voting districts within Delaware. Again, I'm going to use this P1 race table. Let's go to the map. Okay, so here we go. So here's a number by voting district for race data from the decennial census, again from the 2020. You can just zoom in and see in the more urban concentrated areas, you'll have smaller election districts. And then as you get more rural, there's larger ones. Okay, tips and tricks for the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian areas. So there are both legal and statistical areas for which the Census Bureau provides data. So the legal entities include federally recognized American Indian reservations and off-reservation trust areas. There's also tribal subdivisions that can divide those entities. State recognized American Indian reservations, Alaska Native regional corporations, Hawaiian homelands, and New Mexico pueblos. The statistical side are Alaska Native village statistical areas, Oklahoma tribal statistical areas, tribal designated statistical areas, and then state designated statistical areas. And you're looking at one of these statistical areas when you see the essays. right, for statistical areas. Again, if you wanted to use, we have an application called TigerWeb, which is another mapping application. It's just mapping, no data. I've included that as well. That's a great way to look at geographies as well. I've also included the hierarchy of the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian areas. You may be interested in that, how they, drill down to the census block level. And again, you can view the entire hierarchy at the link below. So these would be the steps that we're going to take. We're going to go back under all geographies. In this instance, I would select American Indian, Alaska Native Hawaiian homeland, again, the overreaching one, and then select all of the areas within the United States. I also want to show you when you're doing like an individual geography, for instance, this is the Fort Peck Indian Reservation and Off-Reservation Trust Land in Montana. If you're looking for race data, that's the one thing to be aware of. If you're specifically looking for race data, especially, you have to make sure you pick a race table. Because if you're just kind of picking one random table or kind of like a big table, you may not get that kind of like little breakdown that you can for these geographies. So for instance, for this Fort Peck Indian Reservation, I've selected B02001, and that's giving me information for these areas. Okay. Very similar for selecting, let's say we want to do Fort Peck Indian Reservation and off-reservation trust land in Montana. But in this instance, I want to look at all available tribes. You can go ahead and use this table as well. American Indian Area tribal subdivisions. So these are legal administrative subdivisions of those federally recognized American Indian reservations and those off-reservation trust lands, or statistical subdivisions of Oklahoma tribal statistical areas, OTSAs. These entities are internal units of self-government or administration that serve cultural and/or economic purposes for the American Indians on the reservations, off-reservation trust lands, or the OTSAs. As described as additions, they are described as additions, administrative areas, chapters, county districts, community districts, or segments. So here's an example of what we're going to do. We were looking at all geographies, all American Indian Area Tribal Subdivision Remainder, Tribal Subdivision Navajo Nation Reservation, and off-reservation trust lands in Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, all American Indian tribal subdivisions within the Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust land in Arizona and New Mexico. So we want all geographies. And we want the American Indian tribal subdivision remainder. Okay, so let's do that. Navajo Nation Reservation, off-reservation trust lands. Oh, excuse me. I'm just looking at my notes. Let's go to all geographies. Okay, so I want this particular piece of geography. So I want the Navajo Nation Reservation and off-reservation trust land, and it tells us it's in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. Hold on one, please. One second. Let me start over. All geographies. Right, remainder. Now from here, I want to select the Navajo Nation. Okay, here we go. And then from here, I want all American Indian tribal subdivisions within the Navajo Reservation and all reservation trust land in Arizona and New Mexico. So those are all the pieces that I went ahead and selected. Again, we can look at the tables. There's the Decennial Census and American Community Survey tables, but let's go to the map. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to zoom in right here. So now we're looking at all the pieces here. So this, you can see earlier when we selected all of the American Indian areas, it did select some of these pieces in here, but because we specifically asked for this geography, it's not including, for example, the Hopi Reservation. So this is just a portion of that Navajo Nation Reservation and all reservation trust land. So there is a way to drill down further to get these geographies. And you can see there's some pieces here that are right here, part of them as well. Okay, so we have some resources for learning more. Hopefully I've whetted your appetite and you want to go ahead and learn some more. So to get email updates, you can sign up for email updates. These are what we have, a monthly newsletter that our section does. And then you can use the QR code to sign up for those. And this is just a snapshot of some of the data that we, information that we've released. We do have hands-on practice. So we do these workshops basically every month, and we have multiple kinds. We have the basics of finding data using data.census.gov. We have an advanced one. We have a lot of mapping ones like mapping in data.census.gov, data.census.gov, geography essentials for beginners, and we have economic ones. So these, they're no cost. They're about 3 hours, so they're pretty intensive. So we'll go, we would go through the information, and then there's hands-on questions so you can kind of understand and get more practice with census geographies. And again, this is the link to our workshops, and we're always creating new ones. So you may see a new one pop up in the next few months. We are always looking for people to help us improve data.census.gov. So we are running some usability testing. So would really love to hear from those novice and expert users who meet the following criteria. You either have experience currently or in the past using or analyzing data, and you use data from data.census.gov or other statistical sites. So if you, as someone you know, would like to be interested in participating in the 60-minute study, it's virtual through Microsoft Teams, you can sign up here. And then if you would like to learn more information, we have more information on the testing. And if you do have any questions, you can reach us down at this email below. And then finally, you may have seen a banner here asking for help on helping us build a better data.census.gov. So this is a survey that we're asking data users to give us feedback on how to make the platform even better. Finally, to stay connected to us, we have our resources page, again, with our QR code, looking at the resources of what is data.census.gov. If you do have any questions about this presentation, or about you have a data question that you would like us to help answer, this is our email here, which is census.data@census.gov. And then if you have a group that you would like for us to do a training for, you can send us a training request for that as well. And that is it for me. I don't know if we're going to answer any questions now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Noemi. I always learn new things when you all from SEDSci talk with us. Always
Thank you.
New functionality at data.census.gov. We have a question here from the chat. For these complex geographies, how are the error terms on the estimates handled for a full geography, which would be neatly nested, versus the partial geography?
I don't want to misspeak. I like to say I'm a geographer and not a statistician. So would you please send us that question in our email? And then if we can't answer it, we can always forward it to the section at Census that can help answer those questions.
Yes, and again, that's
the Census.
The email again. Yep.
Yeah, I'll put it up again. Thank you. It's the census.data@census.gov.
Yep, there you go. Perfect. Yep, right there,
Mhm.
census.data at census.gov. Perfect. All right, let's see. Okay, another question. Can you go over again the differences between geographic entities versus summary levels?
Absolutely. Let's go back to data.census.gov. Okay, so let's say I'm just going to select a geography such as state. So when you want to show the within other geographies, for instance, if you want to say, I want to look for a particular geography here. So I want to select a state here. Let's select, we have one we haven't seen earlier, maybe Montana. And then within the, let's say for the within other geographies, you can go ahead and say, I would like American Indian, Alaska Native geographies within Montana or urban areas for Montana. So this helps you kind of drill down into very, very specific ones if you're interested in the ones that are in like another container. Okay. And then if you want to interested in showing geographic components, let's say if I wanted to go Montana, let's do that again. This would give you the, let's say, you know how the instance I showed for the urban rural, if I wanted to look at urban areas or urbanized areas, I can select, let's say I want to look at the urban rural portion that's within Montana. That's when you would show the geographic components. And let's make sure, let's go to the map. Let me take out the state. Okay, sex by age, and you can go back to the map. Oh, it's being finicky with me. Okay, that should work. But yeah, that's how you select the actual components of a geography. Does that make sense? I know it's a little bit of a heavy terminology.
Yes. And again, go ahead and email Noemi and her team, as well as we work with them every day. So if you have any geography related questions on that, geo.geography@census.gov as well. We work together all the time.
Yep.
Great. Thanks so much, Noemi. Thanks for sharing with us.
Well, thanks for everyone sitting through today. Thank you so much.
All right. Next up, we have Tyson Weister. Tyson is a data dissemination specialist at the U.S. Census Bureau's team for data.census.gov and the API, talking about how to use the API. Thanks so much for joining us, Tyson.
Thank you. And thank you all for having us and spending your day learning about census data. So it should be all set up here. This session will be on how to use the Census Bureau data, how to access Census Bureau data using the API. My name's Tyson. I work in the same team that my colleague Noemi works in. So we are the communications area responsible for data.census.gov and the API. So I am super excited today to learn or share more information about the API. What we have planned is kind of starting from the ground up. So whether you've used the API before or if you're new, you're not going to have any API working knowledge in order to get something out of what I'm going to be sharing today. At the Census Bureau, our data API is a RESTful API, and that means that we can essentially get the data through a web browser. So you can think of an API call as a URL in the context of what we're going to be doing today. And you can put in those data requests in your address bar and then see the results in real time on your screen. So we are going to be working towards that today. We'll talk a little bit about basic information about the API to start. There have been some changes recently to the API, so if you have been using it, you'll get something out of this session as well. Then we'll talk about building an API request. And then most of the time today is going to be on a live demonstration where we are going to go step by step in order to make a couple different data requests. So let's go ahead and get started with the basics. want to be very clear. What I'm here to talk about today is the Census Data API. We have the population counts, statistics, and aggregated data from different surveys and programs across the Census Bureau. There's also some microdata available through the Data API that we're not going to be discussing today, but do know it is available, and it falls under the Data API umbrella. So I'm going to be showing you how to access data for different levels of geography and how to get the GeoID in your API results. With that said, if you are interested, just be aware there are other geography-related APIs that are outside of what I'm here to share today. There is a geocoder API that allows you to input different addresses and get latitude, longitude parameters, and of course the Census Bureau geographies that address range falls within. And then we also have Tiger Web services for boundary and shape files accessible through an API. So if you want to learn more about those two, you can explore on our website, and we have some helpful email addresses here below. So focusing in on the Census Data API, one of the common misconceptions is that it's only for developers. That's not the case at all. We'll be talking about different reasons why someone might want to use the API in just a moment, but we get data questions and find that it's of use for all kinds of different audiences: students, teachers, researchers, government agencies, financial institutions, just to name a few examples. All this to say, it's not just for developers, but it certainly fits well with those who have additional technical expertise or experience using software like R or Python, maybe consuming the API in those packages. But just for your average everyday user, there are many beneficial use cases as well. So a couple of those use cases, just to set the stage, all of the data on data.census.gov is on the API. The data.census.gov is powered by the API. However, the API has additional data sets beyond what you can access through data.census.gov. So some people come to the API to get additional data or historical information, maybe the 2005 to 2009 ECS data sets. Another major benefit, the API allows you to get exactly what you need, nothing more, nothing less. You can specify your individual variables of interest. They can even come from different tables from across a particular data set, and you get that returned to you without having to download multiple tables and comb through the results and pinpoint just those little variables that you need from each individual table. And then once you go through all of the steps to get data from an API, it's really easy to access that over time. So if you want to look back historically, maybe you want to prepare yourself for an upcoming data release, you can do a lot of this work up front and then make it a lot easier on yourself to run a query that you have constructed ahead of time and get precisely the data you're looking for. So if you happen to be working in one of the time series data sets, that process will happen seamlessly across historical data or as new data are released. And if you are not in a time series data set, in most cases, you'll find that the variables tend to be relatively consistent from year to year, but you will need to check for changes. So on top of technical developers and people using other software, you all using GIS and mapping applications, there's lots of reasons why even an everyday user may find benefit from an API. So now that we've covered a little bit about who might use it and why, I'm going to talk about what's available, and then we'll get into how to access it. So this is just showing you on a high level different surveys and programs across the Census Bureau that are included in the API. You'll see robust inclusion from demographic and economic data, as well as additional data sets. When you want to access one of those high-level data sets, you'll find an entry or multiple entries for each of those in the Discovery tool. So that is your central point to start getting the data from a particular data set. As of now, we have 1,780 detailed data set entries in the discovery tool. So you'll find that those roll up into these high-level surveys and programs that I'm showing you on this slide. For instance, for the decennial census, you'll find an endpoint for 2010 data sets versus 2020 data sets. You'll also find an endpoint for different products within a year. So for instance, the 2010 summary file 1 is a different endpoint than the 2010 summary file 2. What is new with the API? As of last week, we are requiring API keys for every data request. So we've had API keys ever since I've been using the API. They are easy and free for you to get. So if you have one already, continue to use it for every call. And if you need one, you just go to census.gov/developers. You'll see request a key in the upper left. You'll put in your organization name and email address, and you will get a key emailed to you that is ready to activate and use immediately. So your entry point is census.gov/developers. You need a key, and the discovery tool is what you're going to be looking at to start your data request. The discovery tool is available in different formats, HTML, JSON, and XML. And because we're going to be working in a web browser, we're going to be wanting the HTML version. So that's going to be readable to you on your screen. The machine readable options are those other outputs. And ultimately, what we're going to be looking for when you make a data request is the section of the discovery tool for your data set. So out of the nearly 2,000 detailed data sets that exist on the site, you would want to narrow down in the discovery tool to this entry of what you're looking for. On the bottom of the screen, I'm showing an example from the ACS 5-year data profiles 2017 vintage. And once you get here, most of your work is done for you. So what you'll be doing is consulting the example queries that we see. You'll be finding essentially an API URL or API call that you'll be able to pick the one that most closely matches the geography that you're interested, and then you'll just be able to tweak it with your variables of interest by consulting the variables list. So let's talk about what those query looks like. I'm going to go step by step on building an API request. This is not for you to be able to leave here typing out your API data requests from memory or from scratch. The purpose of this section is for you to be able to recognize the different portions of these URLs so that you know what they represent and how and when to tweak them. So let's start from scratch. There are 7 different steps that we've laid out here. The first is every API data request begins with api.census.gov/data. Next, you'll put in the dataset name. So in this case, I have /2010/DEC/SF1. So this is an example that comes from the 2010 decennial census summary file 1. Next, we have $get equals. So this is your signal to the API that you want it to return data to you. And then you start specifying what data you want back. So first here, I have a list of variables as step 4. We have H001001, name and geo_ID. So this is going to give us the total number of housing units, the geography name, and the geo ID for that geography. After your list of variables, you will specify which geographies you want the data for. So in this example, I have &4 equals tract with a wildcard or asterisk, and in state 16, ampersand in county with a wildcard. So anytime you see the wildcard, it means that you're asking for all results for that particular option. So the way we read this is we want data at the census tract level for all census tracts in Idaho across all counties in the state. And then the last step for 6 is to add in your API key. So you'll put at the end of your query &key equals, and then in place of the language your key goes here, you will put in your personal API key. Again, it is free and you can sign up quickly and easily. So once you have all 6 of those, you put everything together and run that query. If you're using a web browser, it's going to give you the output, something that's going to look like this. So what we see is that there are brackets. The first set of brackets has the variable names for our query. And then each result is included in its own set of brackets below. So in this case, we get one result for each geography that we specified. And we can see as an example in row 2, we see that there are 2,105 total housing units in Census Tract 15 in Bannock County, Idaho, based on the 2010 Census Summary File 1. So we are actually going to construct this as I would do so in the live site. So you kind of saw the different components step by step. We're going to show you how to do it from beginning to end. I do want to note a couple things. First, for the demonstration today, regardless of what data set is being showed in the demonstration, the different strategies, tips, tricks, and tools apply across all of the data sets. So you'll be able to pick up whether you're specifically interested in data from 2010 Summary File 1, or if you want data from perhaps a different data set, the strategies will be transferable for what we show today. I do have step-by-step slides that show every click I'm going to be making on the site, so those will be provided to you after this session for your reference purposes as well. And then the last thing I wanted to note about the demonstration, we're going to start very basic and then add on additional functionality as we go throughout. So let's go ahead and do total housing units for all census tracts in Idaho from the 2010 Census Summary File 1. All right, so the first thing you'll want to do, as I mentioned, go to census.gov/developers. On here again, if you need a key, you can request one. You can dive straight into the discovery tool and get a very long machine readable list of nearly 2,000 detailed data sets, or you can choose what I call the more human readable option to get where you're going. That is the available APIs option here at the top of the page. So I'm going to click available APIs. What we'll see are those different high-level surveys and programs here. I'm going to drill into decennial census and then click the first option, decennial census 2020, 2010, 2000. Once you get here, we did add a recent note explaining that you'll need to add your API key. As of today, that applies even to viewing the discovery tool. And then when you scroll down, you'll see some options here. So we have different tabs for us to choose the different years. For my example, I want 2010. So we'll go ahead and click that. And then the thing that you'll need to do is you do need to know the data set or product type up front. So I need to know not just I want 2010 census, but which of these data sets do I want the data to come from? So in some cases, especially with decennial census or American Community Survey, you may need to do a little bit of research ahead of time. In this case, I want the Summary File 1. And what you'll want to do to get to the discovery tool is grab where it says API call. Notice it has api.census.gov/data, and then it has the data set name. So from here, you will paste that in a new tab. If I run this as is, it's going to tell me I need my key. So what you'll do is after the question mark, you'll put a key equals. You will input your own API key. And then once you run that query, you will see here in your web browser some information. The default is that the data are returned in JSON format. So to get to the HTML version of the discovery tool, you can manually type .html before the question mark, and then you're going to get this very readable, organized version of the discovery tool data. So this is one of the hardest parts, finding the data set you need. Once you get here, again, we consult examples and variables to get to what we're looking for. So I'm going to start by opening up examples in a new tab. What we'll see on the left is every level of geography that these data are available for. And then it shows us the 3-digit summary level code for that geography. So I wanted all census tracts in Idaho. I see state, county, tract, summary level 140. For each level of geography, you will see one or more example queries to choose from. They are identical except for the geography portion of those queries. So you want to take a moment, read through them, and see which one most closely aligns with what you're looking for. So the first one is data for all tracts in Alabama. The second one is for all tracts in Alabama across all counties. It's the same way of writing the first query. It's a little more formal. And then the last one here is for tract 020500 in Alabama, Watauga County. So you would make a decision, pick one of those three. I'm going to choose the second one and use that as my starting point. So opening that in a new tab, in order to get data returned to you, you do need to make sure that your key is input. If you put that in up front, like I did to get into the discovery tool, it will carry over for you throughout the session. So we see Alabama's provided in our results. From here, you'll start tweaking the information in your URL. I'm going to change 01 to 16. And then anytime I make a change, I like to press enter. If you make a mistake, you'll know exactly where you went wrong if you're doing that. So we have it updated to Idaho. We see data for all of the different census tracts within Idaho. And right now, this is telling us 5,181 is the value for this default variable. It happens to be total population. So the last thing that we would need to do to get exactly what we're looking for is switch this variable out with the one that we wanted for total housing units. So going back to the main entry of the discovery tool for this data set, we started with examples. You'll just click on variables. It gives you a list of all of the different variables for this data set. They are in alphabetical order. And there's a lot of them. So 9,000 exactly, to be precise. And this is where, because there are so many different variables for different decennial census and American Community Survey data sets, rather than a readable title for this variable, it's code-based. So they are based on a naming convention from the underlying data tables that they come from. This particular variable comes from table H1, so it starts out with H001, and then 001 also referring to the first row of data from that table. So we see the variable name here, that it refers to total, and it's referring to total housing units. So this is exactly what I want. I would copy that, replace in my API query the default variable with the one I'm interested in, press enter, and then we see our updated results. So I see, just as we saw in the slide format, 2,105 total housing units in Census Tract 15 in Bannock County, Idaho, based on the 2010 Census Summary File 1. So that is our starting point. Let's talk about how we can build on this. What if I want additional variables? Well, you can add them in. So we're going to be doing that. We're going to add in variables for tenure, owner-renter status, for the same geography selection. So back on our site here, in this list of variables, let me zoom out a bit. to load. I did a little bit of research ahead of time on data.census.gov. I found that there is a table called H4 from summary file 1, and that it had that the table title is called tenure, and then it had data based on ownership status. So the second row of data from that table specified owner-occupied units for owners with a mortgage. The third row was owner-occupied housing units for housing units owned free and clear. And then the last fourth row of the table provided data on renter-occupied housing units. So I found that H004, 002, 003, and 004 were variables that I wanted to add to my query. So I copied those and made note on the side. And then I also remembered that I wanted to add the geography ID, so geo_ID to the query. So I grabbed those variables and then I put them, just in the interest of time, kind of copied, paste them, and put them to the side so that I can add them in my query. And you can just kind of repeat this process for up to 50 variables in a call. So then going back to the query we had between H001001 and name, I pasted those additional variables. So in this case, we can see I have 6 variables. They're separated by a comma. They are case sensitive. There are no spaces between the variable. So you do need to be very precise when you're putting this in. And then when we run the query and press enter, we see we get the data for the additional data points. So we, again, still have the total housing units. And then we can see in the case of Census Tract 15, there were 972 owner-occupied housing units with a mortgage or loan, 554 owner-occupied housing units owned free and clear, and then 445 renter-occupied housing units. This was based on the 2010 census. And then because we added geo_ID, we get this fully qualified geo ID. So if you wanted to match this data with the data from the Tiger Line shapefiles, you would look for the geo ID FQ field. And then it also breaks down the geography codes individually on the right-hand side. All right, so let's go back here to our slide and take this a step further. So you've got this information, you found the data you're looking for, it's in your web browser. What do you do with it now? You might want to output it to a CSV file. So I'm going to show you how to do that very easily. We've added some additional functionality to our API to help with this. So back here on the live site, before you output the data, you might want to add in labels. So if you add ampersand descriptive equals true, when I press enter, it's going to add this information to our query. So I don't have to memorize anymore that H004002 refers to total housing units owned with a mortgage or loan. It's specified right here in our query. Next, you can put ampersand output format equals CSV. Notice that F is capitalized, everything else is lowercase. Everything in this URL is case sensitive. When you run that, it is going to automatically generate a download for you. So then we'll be able to open that up here. We see that each variable has its own column. And again, if we wanted to match for mapping purposes, you have GeoID here in column E. So very seamless for you to do this now with those additional functionality that we've released. Now let's go back to the slides. Again, this here is just reminding you, if you want GeoID, you got to add it to your query. For this data set, it's geo_ID. Now let's move on and show you one additional use case that you may find for your data sets. Some data sets have categorical variables the one we were working with, we weren't using any of those variables. So in this example, I wanted to show you how those are applied to the query, and we're just going to do a new data example. So we're going to look at the number of employees working in healthcare and social assistance, or NAICS code 62, for all counties in Wisconsin based on the 2022 econ census. So I'm going to start from beginning to end, just like we did before. We're going to go to census.gov/developers. We are going to click available APIs at the top. And then we're going to follow the prompts, choosing economic census, and then you see economic census 2002 through 2022. We will scroll down. We'll make sure we're still clicked into the data year we want, in this case 2022. It starts with the most common data set that you'll be interested in accessing econ census data for, and then it gives you endpoints for all of the different econ census data sets for 2022. You can see there are quite a number of them. So the data that I want is high-level information, so it's included in economy-wide key statistics. Just like before, I copy the API call, paste it in a new tab, put my API key in place of your key goes here, press enter. If it's not readable, you'll want to probably add .html before the question mark. And now we are at a place where we can work with this in our web browser. And then just like before for decennial census, we'll be working with examples and variables. So starting with examples, we can see this data set is provided for fewer summary levels than, of course, the decennial census. One of those summary levels is state county 050. They're the same example queries. The geography portions are a little different. The first one provides data for all counties. The second one provides data for all counties across all states. And then the third example provides data for Autauga County, Alabama. So pick one of them. I'm going to choose the second one. And then run the query. So this one's a little bit wieldy in terms of the amount of data that's returned. So before I press enter, I'm actually going to update the state here. So I'm going to choose state code 52. So I replace the asterisk with 52 and press enter. Oops, and I must have made a typo. So we'll do that one more time. And we'll give that a moment here to load up. And while that is working, I am going to consult the list of variables that I'm looking for. So back here on the page, you'll see variables. We'll go ahead and click there. In the case of decennial census, we got code-based variables. In econ census, there are much fewer of them. There's 130. So we're able to give options that are a lot more readable. So in this example, I was looking for the number of employees. So you could Control F, type a keyword. We can see the variable for EMP, number of employees. The other variable that I wanted to note here is NAICS code. So this is actually the categorical variable in this example. You can see it shows default displayed in the concept column. That's an indication that its categorical or likely categorical variable. We can see the variable is NAICS 2022, and then it reads 2022 NAICS code. So I'm going to go ahead and click, and I need to add my key in. So let me do that. Once you add in your key, it will show you in some cases, if it shows default displayed, it likely means that there is metadata showing you all of the possible values for this categorical variable. So for instance, you would be able to scan through this list, find the one you're looking for, see what all of the potential options for. Since this has not loaded, I am going to switch over to the slide formats. And these are hidden, so I'm going to keep it in this kind of strange view and just show you what it should look like on the site in the interest of time. So here we have our variables. And then once we add it in, what we see is healthcare and social assistance. And we get the data. And actually by doing this, I apologize. I had the wrong state code. So that was the issue. I've updated that. It was not 52, it was 55 for Wisconsin. And then for my query, I'm going to keep EMP in this example query for number of employees. And then notice it's giving me the data for all of the values, possible values of the NAICS code. So I'm seeing multiple entries for the same geography, Adams County. So the purpose of this exercise is to put ampersand NAICS 2022 equals 62. So you can add these to the end of the API queries for categorical variables if you'd like to restrict the results to not provide data for the default, which is all NAICS codes. It's to provide data just for NAICS 62. So reading this data out, we can see in Adams County, Wisconsin, that there were 454 employees, not independent contractors or self-employed people, but actual employees that worked in NAICS 62 healthcare and social assistance. All right, so sorry about mixing up Wisconsin's state code. And again, this slide is showing you how do you know you're working with categorical variables. Look for default displayed in the required column. And then often if you click on the variable itself, you may need to put your API key in. It will show you the possible values for that variable. So resources for learning more. My colleague Noemi mentioned we have these workshops. There is one specifically on using the API. So if you would like hands-on practice, please join us for one of those. They're anywhere from 2 to 3 hours in length. You will have an instructor giving examples and demonstrations, and then an exercise for you to work through, and then you'll come back together as a group to work through that in real time. We also have a dedicated resources page for using the Census API. For that resources page, you'll find different recorded webinars, PDFs with step-by-step instructions. Also, there's an API user guide there. We also have, again, our email address is the same for data.census.gov and API questions and feedback. And we have a developers forum on Slack for you to interact not only with the Census Bureau, but also with other data users like yourself. So with that, I will leave this up and see if there's any questions. Thank you so much.
Wow, thanks so much, Tyson. I know I learned a lot. That was incredible to me. I don't know, I know what you get. It's a really great data you get, but somehow just moving all that stuff around just in the browser looked like magic to me. It was wonderful. So we have a couple of great questions here. One relates specifically to students, but I suppose this is for anyone. Students, or I guess anyone who doesn't have an organization name to provide, can they still request an API key with just a personal email address?
Yes, you certainly can. It's tied to an email address, so that's the intent. And if you have a question about how to fill out a field or if a field is required or not, you can shoot us an email. But certainly it is meant for everyone to be able to sign up.
Okay, great. And we have many people thanking you for the presentation. I agree, it was wonderful. But could you give a little bit more detail as to what the reasoning was for limiting access to the API with an API key? Used to be able to view the data without an API key, similar to the way you access data on census, data at census.gov.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. It is a security reason to protect us and to protect users. And that also includes making sure that we're able to maintain the level of performance on the API as a whole. So we are able to make sure that someone isn't accessing the API to the extent that it could be, for instance, causing other users to not be able to use the API because they are putting in too many requests or too large of requests, things of that nature. So that's ultimately what it is security reasons and making sure that we are able to have an API that is performing and up and running for everyone and not just a heavy-hitting user.
That makes sense to me. And related to that, is there a daily limit on the number of calls one can make to the API?
There is not any information that I can speak to for limits beyond what is publicly available. So it is
okay.
Limited when there's an issue. There's no like daily amount that I can tell you.
Understood. And is it possible to do a group call for more than one table at a time?
No, it is not. And then for everyone on the call, we showed how to get data for individual variables. Group would allow you to get data for an entire table or sometimes an entire data set if you're working with smaller data sets. And as of now, no, but that is a good question. And we do always take feedback on ways we can make the API work better. So I will note that down.
All right, great. That's the questions we had. Thanks so much again for joining us. And I know, once again, I know a lot of people, hold on, we just, oh yeah, one final question. Has Universe been included in the API or other tables yet?
I don't know the answer to that offhand. So I would encourage you to write us in and we can research that further.
Great.
Census.data at census.gov.
Exactly, yes. And I know just for myself and everyone else here, these are recorded, so we will definitely go back and revisit them. And again, all those webinars and workshops are really helpful, especially on this topic. Thank you so much, Tyson, for joining us.